All right, so you want to know about this new cybercrime law in Pakistan?
Yeah, peak at 2025.
PICA 2025. It's got people talking, that's for sure.
Big time.
We've got a ton of stuff to look at here, articles, government websites, even global perspectives.
Right.
So let's try to make sense of it all for you, okay? This is a deep dive, people. Buckle up.
It's interesting, right? It's not just about, like, catching bad guys online.
Right.
This whole thing has kind of opened up this Pandora's box of questions about security versus freedom. And it's a conversation that's happening everywhere, not just Pakistan.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so before we go too far, can we rewind a little? Pakistan already has a cybercrime law, right?
Right. PICA, the Prevention of Electronic Crimes Act.
The original PICA. So what's the big deal with this new amendment then? PICA 2025.
So PICA, that was put in place back in 2016. And it was to deal with, like hacking, online fraud, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And now, fast forward to today, we've got PICA 2025. On paper, it's supposed to be all about fighting digital crime, right?
Oh, okay. Makes sense.
Sounds good. But there's a catch, and that is that it was kind of rushed through Parliament and signed into law by President Zardari
Oh,
without much input from, anyone outside the government.
interesting.
And that has a lot of people worried.
Yeah, makes sense. It makes sense. Like, we were reading about the Asia Internet Coalition, the AIC.
Right.
They're basically waving this giant red flag,
Yeah.
claiming this thing, PICA 2025, could really hurt digital rights, online freedoms, even Pakistan's economy.
Oh, absolutely. The AIC, they're worried that PICA 2025 could, like, scare off foreign investors
Right.
who might look at this and say, uh-oh, this law, it's unpredictable,
Yeah.
it's risky for business, and it could also stifle innovation, like
Yeah.
within Pakistan's tech sector, making it harder for local companies to, compete on a global scale.
Wow. So hold on. So it's not just about like what people are posting online. We're talking like real world economic impact here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's way bigger than that. And it's not just the big tech companies that are worried.
Okay.
Human rights groups are sounding the alarm too, saying that this amendment, PICA 2025, is like this echo of some troubling trends that we're seeing globally.
Okay, wait, hold on. Let me pull up this article from the AIC. Okay, here we go. Here's a quote from their managing director, Jeff Payne.
Okay.
He says, the process to introduce these rules lacked transparency and inclusivity, and we urge the government to halt the implementation of the new rules and engage in meaningful consultation.
Wow.
Yeah.
Strong words.
Strong.
And you know what? It really drives home a crucial point.
You're right.
Who gets to decide what is and isn't acceptable online? That's the core of this whole thing.
That's the big question.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's get into the weeds a little bit here. What exactly does PICA 2025 actually change?
Well, one major change is the criminalization of spreading fake or false information online.
Okay.
So think about that. You share something on social media,
Right.
and the government says, nope, that's fake news.
Yeah. Huh.
Boom. You could be looking at up to 3 years in prison.
3 years. That's crazy. It's like something out of, I don't know, like a dystopian novel or something.
Right.
But how do they even define fake news? I mean, like what's to stop them from just calling any criticism fake?
Well, and that's the scary part. The language is incredibly vague.
Yeah.
And that ambiguity
Yeah.
is what's freaking everyone out. Who decides what's fake? Could this be used to silence journalists, activists,
Yeah.
anyone who, dares to speak out against the government? These are the questions that, are keeping people up at night.
Right. And it's not like Pakistan has this perfect record when it comes to internet freedom, right? Haven't there been like internet shutdowns and platform bans before?
Unfortunately, yes. Just last year, after the elections, the government banned Platform X.
Right.
And this followed, a pattern of internet shutdowns in response to protests and unrest.
Yeah.
It all kind of adds to this climate of uncertainty, especially, journalists, activists, people who would rely on the internet to do their work.
Okay, so let me get this straight. So we have a rushed amendment, vague language, and it could potentially be used to silence dissent. And this is all happening in a country that already has a history of restricting internet access. It's a little unsettling, honestly.
It is, and it's why groups like Human Rights Watch are taking such a hardline stance.
Yeah.
They're not just, expressing concern. They're calling for PICA 2025 to be, like, totally scrapped.
Wow.
Or at the very least, significantly revised to, be in line with international human rights standards.
Right. I mean, they're not holding back. In one article, their Associate Asia Director, Patricia Gossman, she said that that the law, quote, fails to protect both public safety and fundamental rights.
Yeah. And that quote, it really gets to the heart of the matter, doesn't it?
It does.
This isn't just about security or freedom.
Right.
It's about finding a way to protect both.
Yeah.
And that's where PICA 2025 seems to, kind of miss the mark.
So it's like this tug of war.
Yeah.
On one side, you have the government saying, we need these powers to fight cybercrime and protect national security. And then on the other side, you have these human rights groups saying, wait, hold on. These powers could be used to, crush dissent and restrict basic freedoms.
Yeah. And that tension, that's what makes this whole situation so complex and so fascinating, really.
Right.
Because it's not just good guys versus bad guys, you know?
Right.
There are valid points on both sides.
Yeah, I see that. But the way things are going, it feels like Pakistan is headed towards a much more controlled internet, where the government has a lot more power to decide what people can see and what they can say online. And that has some pretty big implications, not just for people in Pakistan, but for, I don't know, like the whole idea of a free and open internet.
You've hit on a really important point. What happens in one country, it doesn't stay there, right? It can ripple out and affect the global digital landscape. Think about it. If one government starts restricting online freedoms, it can kind of set a precedent.
Right. And then other countries might say, oh, okay, well, they're doing it, so we can do it too.
Exactly.
So Pakistan is kind of like a test case.
In a way,
yeah.
And that's why it's so important to understand, like, all the different sides of this issue, right? And to have these tough conversations, because what's at stake here, it's not just the future of Pakistan's internet.
Right.
It's the future of the internet as a whole.
It's like that butterfly effect thing, What happens in Pakistan with this law could, have ripple effects across the whole internet. It's a little unsettling.
Yeah.
But speaking of the bigger picture, you said earlier that this situation with PICA 2025, it's kind of like mirroring some global trends.
Right.
What did you mean by that?
Well, governments all over the world are trying to figure out this same problem, right?
Yeah.
How to balance security online with, individual freedoms.
Yeah.
And we're seeing it in different ways.
Okay.
Data privacy rules in Europe, content moderation in the U.S., even internet shutdowns in places like Myanmar.
It's like everyone's trying to figure out how to tame this digital Wild West, right?
Exactly. And there's no easy answer.
Right.
No one solution that fits everywhere.
Yeah.
What works in one country might be a disaster in another.
Yeah.
And every decision, it comes with trade-offs.
So it's not just about Pakistan figuring this out on their own. It's about finding a global solution that respects both security and freedom. That sounds like a pretty huge task.
It is. And that's why it's so important to have these conversations.
Okay.
And to share information, to learn from each other's experiences. Because no one can solve this alone.
Right. Okay, so we've talked about the controversy around PICA 2025. We've touched on how this reflects a broader, global struggle.
Right.
But before we get lost in the weeds of all that,
Sure.
Let's zoom back in on Pakistan for a sec.
Okay.
They have their own, agency that's dedicated to fighting cybercrime, right?
Right.
The National Response Center for Cybercrime, the NR3C.
Yeah, the NR3C.
What can you tell us about them?
Think of them as Pakistan's cybercrime detectives.
Okay.
They're the ones on the front lines, investigating everything from hacking to online harassment, you name it.
Yeah, from what I've seen on their website, they seem pretty active. They've cracked down on these illegal VoIP operations, handled online harassment cases, even provided technical assistance to other law enforcement agencies.
They've got a lot on their plate, that's for sure. But here's the question, right?
Okay.
How will PICA 2025 affect their work? Will it give them better tools to fight cybercrime? Or will it kind of tie their hands?
That's a good point. It's kind of like a double-edged sword, right? On one hand, the government's saying this amendment will give the NR3C more power to go after cyber criminals. But then on the other hand, you have these critics who are worried that it'll give them too much power.
Right.
And that power could be misused to target people who haven't actually done anything wrong.
Yeah. It's a really tricky situation, and it'll be interesting to see how it all unfolds. But I think it's important to remember that the NR3C, these are real people doing a really tough job in a complex environment. Yeah, and they're going to be wrestling with with the same ethical dilemmas that we've been talking about.
Right, exactly. So, okay, the NR3C, they're the boots on the ground, right?
Right.
Dealing with the day-to-day reality of cybercrime in Pakistan.
Yeah.
But what about on a global level?
Okay.
Earlier, we talked about organizations like Interpol and the FBI.
Right, yeah.
What are they doing to combat cybercrime, on an international scale?
Well, first of all, you have to imagine the scale of what they're dealing with.
Right.
Cybercrime, it doesn't have any borders.
Right.
Criminals can be anywhere in the world, targeting individuals, businesses, even governments.
Yeah, it's like the Wild West, but online.
Exactly. And that's why organizations like Interpol and the FBI are so crucial. They're facilitating international cooperation.
Okay.
Which is absolutely essential in this fight.
So what does that cooperation look like in real life?
Well, think about it this way. Let's say a cybercrime happens in, I don't know, Germany.
Okay.
But the perpetrators,
Yeah.
they're operating from servers in Russia.
Okay.
And they're using stolen financial info from victims in the United States. To solve that kind of case, you need law enforcement from all those countries working together, sharing information, coordinating investigations.
So it's not just about chasing hackers through cyberspace.
Right.
It's about building relationships.
Yes.
Trust. Shared strategies, across borders.
And that's not easy to do.
Right.
You have different legal systems, different languages, different political landscapes.
Yeah.
But organizations like Interpol, they're helping to bridge those gaps.
So they're the glue that's holding this whole global fight against cybercrime together.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And it's not just about catching criminals after they've, already done something.
Right.
It's also about prevention.
Oh.
About sharing best practices, about training law enforcement all over the world to be better prepared to deal with these threats.
And what about the types of cybercrime that they're tackling? I know we've mentioned things like phishing, ransomware, malware, but what are they really focused on right now? What are they most worried about?
Well, one thing that really jumped out at me from the FBI's website, it's this thing called business email compromise.
Business email compromise.
Or BEC.
BEC.
It's basically this really targeted scam where they trick businesses into transferring funds to fraudulent accounts.
Wait, so you're telling me someone could lose their whole company because of a well-written email?
It happens more often than you'd think. And the scary part is these scammers, they're getting more and more sophisticated. They're doing their research.
Right.
They're finding out about their targets, crafting these emails that look incredibly convincing. It's like a digital con game.
Yeah.
And the stakes are really high.
Okay, I'm definitely going to be double-checking every email I get from now on. Especially if it's asking for money.
That's probably a good idea.
Yeah. But beyond BSC, I mean, there's a whole other world of threats out there. Ransomware attacks.
Right.
They're becoming more and more common, right?
Yeah, where hackers, they lock down your entire computer system.
Right.
And then they demand payment to release it.
Yeah.
And then you have malware.
Right.
These malicious programs that can steal your data,
right,
spy on your activities, even damage your devices.
So it's like this constant arms race.
Yeah.
The good guys are trying to stay one step ahead of the bad guys, but the bad guys are always finding new ways to exploit weaknesses. It's a lot, honestly.
It is. And that's why it's so important to be aware of the risks and to take steps to protect yourself.
All right, so we've got the NR3C in Pakistan working on the ground level. We've got Interpol and the FBI coordinating this global fight against cybercrime. And then we have all these different types of cyber threats, popping up faster than we can keep track of them. It's a pretty complex picture.
It is. And it really highlights the fact that this is a problem that affects all of us. We're all connected in this digital age, right?
Yeah.
Which means that cybercrime, it's no longer someone else's problem.
No.
It's everyone's problem.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, from the controversies around PACA 2025 to the global fight against cybercrime,
right,
and Pakistan's own efforts to address these challenges.
Yeah.
What's the main takeaway here for our listener?
I think the key takeaway is that this isn't a black and white issue.
Okay.
There are legitimate concerns on both sides of the debate.
You mean the government's desire for security versus the people's need for freedom?
Exactly. And finding that balance, that's That's the real challenge. It requires open dialogue, collaboration,
Right.
and a willingness to adapt to the ever-changing landscape of the digital world.
It sounds like we're all walking a tightrope in this digital age.
We are, and it's a tightrope that's constantly shifting beneath our feet. But that's also what makes it so fascinating.
Speaking of fascinating, there's one more detail about the NR3C that I found really intriguing. So we've been talking about the NR3C in Pakistan, their work fighting cybercrime, and how this new PICA 2025 might change things for them.
Right.
But there's this one thing I saw on their website really caught my eye. They have a whole section dedicated to like public awareness about cybercrime.
Oh, that's interesting. So they're not just focused on catching the bad guys after the fact.
Right.
They're actually trying to like empower people to protect themselves online.
Yeah.
That's a smart move.
Yeah. They've got like these online safety guides, tips for parents on how to keep their kids safe online, even resources for businesses to help them, like strengthen their cybersecurity. It's like they're trying to build a digital shield around the whole country.
That's a much better way to put it. It's about creating a culture of cybersecurity awareness. Because let's be honest, laws and regulations, they can only do so much.
Right.
The best defense against cybercrime is an informed and vigilant public.
So it's about giving people the knowledge and tools they need to be their own first line of defense.
Exactly. And that's something that often gets overlooked in these discussions.
Yeah.
We tend to focus on the big picture stuff, the laws, the international cooperation, the fancy tech tools. But sometimes the simplest solutions are the most effective.
Like teaching people how to create strong passwords
Yeah.
or how to spot a phishing email.
Exactly. Because at the end of the day, cybercrime, it often relies on human error. If people are aware of the risks and know how to protect themselves, it makes it a whole lot harder for the criminals.
So kudos to the NR3C for taking that proactive approach. It's like they're saying, look, we're here to fight the bad guys, but we need your help.
And that's a message that resonates far beyond Pakistan, don't you think? Cybersecurity, it's a shared responsibility. It's something we all need to be invested in.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We've looked at the controversies around PFCHA 2025, the global fight against cybercrime, and what Pakistan's doing to address these challenges, both through law enforcement and through public awareness. It's been a whirlwind tour.
It has, and I think it's a good reminder that the digital world, just like the physical world, is constantly changing. New challenges, new threats, new opportunities.
And it seems like there are rarely easy answers.
Right.
But by engaging with these tough questions, by staying informed, and by working together, hopefully we can navigate this digital landscape in a way that protects both our security and our freedoms.
Well said. And who knows, maybe one of our listeners will be inspired to become the next generation of cybercrime fighter or a cybersecurity expert.
Right.
Or a digital rights advocate.
That's a great thought. So to all our listeners out there, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep pushing for a safer and more open internet.
And thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.
Until then, happy exploring.